Good evening. My name is Isabella Rutiliano, and I'm with my fellow colleague Taylor. And we wanted to have this meeting with the team to discuss a client that we have in our school that would benefit from play therapy, more specifically cognitive behavioral play therapy. And before diving into this treatment plan for our client, I would like to present some background information of our client. Okay, so we have Jennifer. She is 11-year-old Hispanic female. Jennifer currently lives at home with her biological mother. Her father was recently removed from the house, so due to physically abusing Jennifer and her mother since Jennifer was a toddler. Jennifer is upset with her father that he was removed from the house and blames her mother for reporting it to law enforcement. She has a history of self-injurious behaviors, and a few years ago, she attempted suicide where she tried to jump out of her bedroom window. She also has a history of being admitted to a rehab facility for her suicide attempts and ideations. Jennifer reports that she has no motivation to do anything and reports she doesn't care if something bad happens to her. She reports saying in therapy. Jennifer struggles academically and will attempt to skip school since her mom works full time. Jennifer recently reported that her father has been seeing another woman and they have a newborn baby together. When speaking to Jennifer about this, she reported, I don't understand why he does not hurt my baby brother. Maybe he never loved me. Jennifer has recently been hospitalized for having thoughts of killing herself. Her depression has gotten increasingly worse since the birth of her baby brother. The presenting problem is that Jennifer has relapsed and begun to self harm and reports she has no motivation and feels worthless. Her mother has spoken to the school, social workers, Taylor, and I, and she is worried because Jennifer sleeps a lot and has no motivation to do anything and has little to no appetite. Um, her mom reports that Jennifer loves to run track and recently quit the team because she has no interest in running anymore. Um, so Jennifer's diagnosis, according to DSM-5, would be major depressive disorder. Um, and DSM-5 outlines the following criteria to make this diagnosis of depression. And Jennifer has been experiencing five or more symptoms during the same 2 week period and has at least one symptoms of depressed mood and two loss of interest or pleasure. So Jennifer has depressed moods most of the day, nearly every day. Um, she has significant weight loss. Um, so within the month, Jennifer has lost around 10 pounds. Um, she has experiencing fatigue and loss of energy nearly every day. She has feelings of feeling worthless um, and has excessive guilt nearly every day. She has diminishing ability to think or concentrate every day, especially in school. And she has recurrent thoughts of death, recurrent suicide ideations, like I mentioned above, and has had suicide attempts for committing suicide.
Thanks, Bella. Thanks for that great introduction on our client. So in this next section, I'm going to be outlining a couple of the theories that Bella and I initially thought that we were going to use with Jennifer, but we decided on a different one. So the first one is child-centered play therapy. So child-centered play therapy and adverse child-centered play therapy is a type of play therapy, obviously. And I have this article talking about it and the usefulness of it, so I'll be talking about it now. So the first article is called Child-Centered Play Therapy and Adverse Childhood Experiences, a randomized control trial, and it explains that CCPT, which is child-centered play therapy, uses play with children in order for the child to experience full acceptance, empathy, and understanding from the counselor and processes inner experiences and feelings through play and symbols. And the relationship between the child and the therapist is really important in this specific therapy, as it helps induce positive change within the child. And the main goal of CCPT is to unleash the child's potential to move toward integration and self-enhancing their ways of being. So these therapists typically focus on accepting the child for who they are, and they focus on the uniqueness of the said child and understanding the child's wants and needs. And a lot of verbal and nonverbal responses are used in this type of therapy, such as I am here, I hear you, I care. And these are all relayed to the child in order to establish the goal of focusing on like the uniqueness and whatnot. Um, Typically, CCPT is child led. So the child explores what type of play they would like to focus on during a session with the therapist. And during CCPT, the therapist focuses on the child developing resilience instead of focusing on the child's main presenting problem. And this helps the child to further develop their resilience in order to properly adapt to their externalizing environment that may cause their maladaptive behaviors. So that's just a brief overview, and now I'm going to briefly talk about the study. So the study focuses on a young child with a history of adverse childhood experiences, so ACEs. And in this study, 29 girls participated and 91 boys. And participants in the study had two 30-minute CCPT sessions a week for a total of 8 weeks. And by the end of this study, researchers found that the children who partook in the study had statistically significant improvement over the course of 8 weeks. And children with multiple ACEs were found to have less behavior problems after the intervention of CCPT. And results also found that children gained greater empathy and social competences when this specific therapy was introduced. And the next play therapy that Bella and I were thinking about using was Adlerian play therapy. So the journal that I'm going to be focusing on for this specific therapy is called The Effectiveness of a Play Therapy Intervention on Children's Externalizing and Off-Task Behaviors. So the scholarly article examines a single case research design that investigates the effectiveness of Adlerian play therapy on behaviors of 2 elementary aged children, and they have externalizing and off-task classroom behaviors. So before, going into the study, I'm just going to briefly explain what Adlerian play therapy is. So Adlerian play therapy is based off the theoretical tenets of Alfred Adler's individual psychology. So these theorists typically believe that individuals are creative and they strive for belonging and are typically goal-directed. So if a play therapist were to use Adlerian play therapy, they typically focus on using skills such as tracking, reflecting, feelings, encouraging, setting limits, restating specific content, and whatnot. And there's other more like directive skills that are used with the children, such as creating stories or using puppets with the child. And in this specific therapy, there are 4 main phases of Adlerian play therapy, which are build an egalitarian relationship with the child, investigate the child's lifestyle, help the child gain insight, and reorient and re-educate the child to new ways of feelings, thinking, and behaving. So typically during the first stage, the therapist focuses on creating a relationship with the child where they feel respected and part of the therapeutic process. The second phase is investigating the lifestyle, where the therapist focuses on obviously understanding the child's lifestyle. And the therapist focuses on how the child sees the world and their beliefs and all that stuff. The third phase, which is gaining insight, is where the therapist uses directed play in order to help the child become more aware of their patterns and emotions and other behaviors. And the final phase, which is reorienting and re-educating the child, focuses on the therapist and the child replacing the child's maladaptive behaviors with adaptive behaviors, teaching them new skills to do so. So those are basically the main tenets of Adlerian play therapy. So now I'll be talking about the study briefly. So the study focuses on 2 elementary age children, like I mentioned earlier, and their names are Andrew and Grayson. So both of the participants in the study received bi-weekly Adlerian play therapy for about 6 weeks. And each child had individual sessions with a therapist in the beginning of the week, and then towards the end of the week, they had a group session with a therapist. And both the group session and the individual session were around 30 minutes long. And data from the study showed that both children really greatly improved from the use of Adlerian play therapy. So their on-task behaviors, ADHD problems, and other maladaptive behaviors were shown to be greatly improved after 6 weeks of therapy. And both of the children's targeted behaviors were reduced after the intervention period. So where Adlerian play therapy was introduced. And Grayson also saw a greater improvement than Andrew, but researchers believe that with more time, Andrew would have had gained similar results to Grayson. And the main reason why Grayson did not have as amazing results as Andrew is because his presenting behaviors were on a greater scale of maladaptiveness than Andrew or Grayson. My bad. And the last article is regarding cognitive behavioral play therapy for anxiety and depression. And this is the actual therapy that Bella and I decided to use with Jennifer. So first I'll be talking about CBT, CBPT, and then I'll be briefly talking about the article itself. So CBT is called cognitive behavioral play therapy, and it's a treatment that's usually used with younger children, and it's based on the theories of cognitive behavioral development. So CBPT adopts cognitive behavioral theory, which holds the notion that a person's thoughts determine how an individual may feel or behave in certain situations. And the theory says that one's emotions are typically determined by past events that they may have experienced. So cognitive behavioral therapy focuses on a person's thoughts and perceptions on a specific event that may be irrational or inaccurate, and they try to challenge that these cognitions are maladaptive, and they hope to change them into more adaptive thoughts. So cognitive behavioral play therapy incorporates all these theories that I just mentioned by using it into play. And there are 4 specific phases in cognitive behavioral play therapy, which are introduction, assessment, treatment, and determination. So there are some common techniques used with this theory, and these are usually psychoeducation, cognitive restructuring, positive self-statements, and problem solving. And typically, cognitive behavioral play therapy usually takes place in like a playroom or an office with toys such as puppets, papers, stickers, and books. And like I said, we did use this therapy with Jennifer. So Bella will talk more in detail about the application of this therapy a couple minutes later in the presentation. So like I said, I do have an article talking about the effectiveness of this play therapy. So the first case that I have is about a 6-year-old child named Aaron, and he was referred to cognitive behavioral play therapy due to his separation anxiety. And it was really bad, and it got especially bad during kindergarten, and he used to cry daily when he left for school, and he began to worry about leaving his parents like the night before school, which caused a lot of sleep disruptions and other behavioral problems. And during actual cognitive behavioral play therapy with the therapist, he and the therapist created books such as What to Do When I Miss Mom. And along with the therapist, Aaron created more positive self-statements and coping statements to relate to himself when he was separated from his mother. So some of his statements were like, I miss mom, but I will see her after school. And he also expressed his thoughts and feelings about separation through other toys, such as toy cars that he really enjoyed. And along with this work that Aaron did with a therapist, the parents were really encouraged to positively reinforce his behaviors. So for example, he was given stickers if he left his mom without crying. And after numerous sessions with the therapist, Aaron's behaviors eventually did change, and he was able to go to school without struggling. So like I said, this shows the effectiveness of cognitive behavioral play therapy on a child. So next we have treatment plan. So off to you, Bella.
Thank you so much, Taylor, for that. So the treatment plan. So the presenting problem for Jennifer is that she's having increased thoughts of suicidal ideation since the advent of her father having this new baby with his significant other, and the inability of her being able to see her father. So the goals during the assessment process, when talking to the client and her mother, these are some goals that they both agreed upon that would be beneficial for Jennifer. So one goal was to reduce levels of self-harm and decrease suicide ideations. Second goal is to improve overall relationships with family members and her peers. And the final goal is to begin to manage feelings better with healthy adaptive coping mechanisms.
And now we have, oh, sorry, I can go. So now we have the intervention part of the assessment. So there's going to be 3 weeks of assessment, 1 week with the child alone with a therapist, 1 week with the child and their mother, and 1 week with the mother alone with a therapist. So baseline data is going to be collected during this time period, during the 3 weeks of assessment, and the child's going to be given the PHQ-9 modified scale for adolescents during the first week of intervention to fill it out. And then the actual intervention period where cognitive behavioral play therapy will be introduced to the child is going to be 8 weeks long, and it's going to be once a week for 50 minutes. And the child will meet each Saturday with the play therapist, and cognitive behavioral play therapy will be used during those sessions on Saturday. And specific toys such as puppets, dollhouses, stickers, and books will be used with Jennifer in order to model adaptive behaviors instead of maladaptive ones.
Thank you, Taylor. And now I'm going to discuss, 3 play therapy techniques from CBT play therapy. So one technique that we will be using is called coping self-statements. And the way in which, so this is basically the way in which children interpret events and not the events themselves, and it affects their inability to cope and function effectively, both socially and academically. And children's perceptions of events can negatively influence their social skill development. Negative thoughts lead to negative self statements, which can lead to poor decision making and interaction with peers and their adults. For example, a child who predicts no one wants to play hide and go seek with them at recess, supported by their negative self statement, might be, I can't run very well or hide as well as my friends. And this negative self talk can lead to poor social interactions and hinder the development of their social skills. So, the play therapist can work with the client in a group setting with other kids or individually to teach them coping skills of coping with self statements. So, the child learns simple statements about themselves, such as, I can hide as well my peers. These positive affirmations can be written down during the session, and the client can apply these affirmations to learning different social skills. For our client, Jennifer, these negative statements are usually, I don't deserve love, or I don't know why I should live. No one will care if I was gone. So for Jennifer, we want to help change these negative self statements and have her come to the realization that these are false. And when she might be having a bad day, to not go to these negative ways of thinking. Maybe coming up with, I'm having a bad day, but it doesn't affect who I am. Or even though at times I feel alone, I know that I have people, and have her list those people and that care and love for me. Having her be aware of her support system. These materials needed for this technique might be having worksheets about self statements and having her write them down, and like the negative thoughts that come up and what are the alternative positive ways of thinking about the situation. So another technique is called modeling. So modeling, for example, is we can use a puppet, a doll, a stuffed animal to demonstrate an appropriate social skill to children. Several other examples of modeling of puppets can include shaping and positive reinforcement during the social skills session. The clinician, the play therapist, selects 2 puppets along with a social skill to introduce into the session. And an example might be, let's say you have a dragon puppet. Mr. Dragon is going to practice his listening skills with Miss Butterfly, the other puppet. The dragon puppet listens to the butterfly puppet and exhibits appropriate listening skills, and is provided with encouragement and positive feedback to the dragon puppet, exhibits the steps for appropriate listening skills. So for a client, we may want to teach her how to advocate for herself when she's having depressive thoughts or suicide ideations. And Jennifer has a really difficult time advocating and asking for help because she feels like no one cares for her, and therefore she bottles up all these emotions until she can't take it anymore, which is a result to her hospitalizations and her self-harm. So maybe having like a puppet, 2 puppets, and she picks one that she wants to be, and modeling that behavior of asking for help and going to a support system. Lastly, behavioral rehearsal. It provides an opportunity for the play therapist to help children master difficult situations by utilizing appropriate social skills. By rehearsing new, more functional behaviors are observed and practiced by the child. The goal of the behavioral rehearsal is for the child to recognize and modify social skills deficiencies and ways of responding by role playing a variety of alternate responses. So the play therapist can use dolls or puppets to coach more adaptive responses. In this way, social skills are modeled for the client and the client can rehearse the new skills. For example, the play therapist might choose to focus on dealing with anger and recognizing others' anger to the targeted social skill. The selected puppets are having a dialogue about the situation at the school or the home, whatever the environment may be, that made them angry. And the play therapist will coach the puppets on the appropriate responses regarding expressing anger in an appropriate way. The client are then given the opportunity to practice with the puppets, and the play therapist will provide feedback regarding the interaction of the puppets and the appropriate responses. And the client continues rehearsing until all are satisfied with appropriate responses for expressing anger in that environment they have expressed. So for Jennifer, we may want to teach her how to recognize when a situation might be triggering her to self-harm and what could she do instead to prevent her from harming herself, because that is one of her goals. We might put on a puppet show of this scenario and have one puppet who might want to self-harm themselves ask to speak to a trusted adult, or have them engage in an activity that they enjoy to keep their mind off of wanting to harm themselves. So we just want to keep in mind that Jennifer has been through a traumatic experience from abuse from her father, and this form of play therapy might help her open up and eliminate her negative experiences with traditional talk therapy, because it is going to be more playful and interactive. And my colleague and I believe that our client will respond well to these various techniques because at a young age, Jennifer had to mature at a young age, and play was not a typical aspect in her household due to the circumstances she had to face. So Jennifer has a difficult time expressing herself with traditional talk therapy, and she becomes resistant and defensive. Therefore, having this playful component might benefit Jennifer and have her open up and process these emotions and to help reach her goals. So I'm going to discuss now how we're going to evaluate the effectiveness of each technique. So in order to see if this technique is working for coping self-statements to evaluate the effectiveness, we will focus if the child is actually really doing these positive self-statements during the sessions. See if she's utilizing these self-statements outside of therapy as well. Therefore, we're going to focus on if Jennifer's behaviors are changing during the session. So the question might be, does she have fewer negative self-statements about herself? For modeling, we're going to evaluate the effectiveness of this technique. We want to see if Jennifer is actually doing and implementing this technique outside of the therapy session. Therefore, we might have Jennifer give us a puppet show and play out a situation that we provide to her and see if she's implementing the appropriate social skill that we have learned during our sessions together. And lastly, for behavioral rehearsal to evaluate the effectiveness of this technique, we want to see if Jennifer is actually doing this technique and implementing it outside of her sessions. Therefore, since the goal of behavioral rehearsal is for students to recognize and modify social skill deficiencies, the way of responding by role playing a variety of alternate responses, we might put a puppet show or have dolls interact with one another and create a scenario and have Jennifer recognize what is going on with the puppets or the dolls and explain what the social skill is and what appropriate skill should the puppets do instead, and identify where they could have improved on to make the situation a better and positive outcome.
Thank you, Bello. So we have learned so much about our client today in this little video. So we have one final part that Bella and I wanted to discuss, and that is on the ethical issues that may arise in treatment with Jennifer. And I just want to preface this by saying that this ethical issue might not just arise in Jennifer's case, it could arise in any case that you are dealing with when working with the child and using play therapy with the child. So again, this applies to not only our client Jennifer, but it applies to really all children that you may work with in the future. because when working with the child, you're also working with the parents. So one of the main ethical issues that could arise really in any treatment with a child is really the aspects of confidentiality. So there are numerous instances where parents really want to know what the child is saying during a session with the therapist, and maybe what the child does during play therapy with their play therapist. And again, we are working with the child and parent when we're doing play therapy with the child, and it really is important to respect and take notes of the parents' wishes, but it is like our main goal when working with the child is to create a safe space for this child in order for them to speak freely about the emotions. So it's really important that we focus on that. But again, we have that ethical issue of the parent wanting to know what the child is talking about. But it's really important that you create the safe space between the child and the therapist, because it really is the pivotal aspect in a child's healing process, having that therapeutic relationship with the therapist. And if you do break confidentiality with the child, talking about something to the parent that the child may have not been ready to talk about, it could result in the child losing trust in the therapist. And this could really hinder the therapeutic relationship and the overall healing process that you're trying to create in play therapy. And one way to mitigate that really just slippery ethical issue is if the parent is interested in knowing what the child discusses during play therapy, the first thing maybe that we should do is maybe ask the child if they're willing to share this information to their parent. So, bringing them in the conversation instead of just immediately going to the parent and talking about what their child was saying during a session. So again, this allows more middle ground aspect of confidentiality. Oh my God, confidentiality, where the parent may still be able to know what's going on during a session with the child, but the child still does have consent over the information that's being shared to the parent. So again, that it's a very slippery situation to navigate, and Bella and I both recognize that, which is why we really did want to talk about this as our final point today during our session. Because again, if you are going to work with children, you're going to work with parents, and one day you will all have to face this. So it's important we recognize it now in this session where we have our client and applying it to our client, Jennifer. So yeah, that's really all we have for today. I really appreciated you guys all learning about Jennifer and listening to her case. Bella, do you have anything you want to say?
I just want to say thank you for your time, and we're looking forward to working with Jennifer and implementing this play therapy with her and hopefully meeting all her goals.
Yeah, thank you so much. If you have any questions, just shoot us an email. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.